when the sheriff rang my doorbell at sunrise, holding an eviction notice typed in Comic Sans. Yeah, Comic Sans. I knew my Saturday had taken a turn for the absurd. I'm talking 3 hard knocks that rattled the glass, all while I'm standing there in pajama pants, coffee in hand, blinking at the pale orange sky out my kitchen window, wondering if this was a joke or some elaborate prank. But there he was, Deputy Martinez, shuffling his boots on my porch and looking every bit as confused as I felt. "Are you Ethan Rowe?" he asked, glancing down at the notice, then up at me, then back again, as if hoping the words on the page would morph into something that made sense. I said yeah, produced my ID, and waited for the punchline. Instead, he handed me the most ridiculous eviction notice I'd ever seen, signed by none other than Glenda Marsh, our HOA president and, apparently, self-appointed queen of Cypress Hollow. According to the notice, I'd broken multiple bylaws, failed some imaginary housing share protocol, and had 24 hours to vacate my own home. To add insult, page 2 included a screenshot of my guest room already listed on Airbnb under Glenda's name, complete with the description, "Cozy suburban retreat, lawn compliance guaranteed." I kid you not. The deputy just shook his head, handed me the papers, and mumbled that in 15 years on the force, this was by far the weirdest call he'd ever taken. "Get a lawyer," he advised, before heading back to his car, no doubt eager to escape whatever madness he'd just witnessed. And with that, the neighborhood grapevine began to hum. Curtains twitching up and down the block, everyone eager for the latest drama. But what nobody knew yet was that this was just the latest escalation in a long, ugly war with Glenda Marsh. Let me back up. I'm Ethan, 35, IT consultant, working mostly from home since I bought my ranch-style place here 3 years ago. I moved to Cypress Hollow for all the classic reasons: quiet, decent schools, not too far from the city, just far enough from the noise. I wanted a little peace, a backyard for a barbecue now and then, and maybe a shot at that elusive American dream. Property, privacy, a place to call my own. For a while, it worked. The neighbors were friendly, kept to themselves, but waved as they walked dogs or fetched mail. The Patel's kids occasionally launched a soccer ball into my yard. The Johnsons kept to their roses and crossword puzzles. Then there was Glenda, mid-50s, always perfectly put together, hair like a helmet, luxury SUV parked dead center in her drive, as if daring anyone to say a word. Glenda, as it turned out, had ideas. Big ones. Not just about lawn height or mailbox color, but about communal resource sharing, which, in her mind, meant private bedrooms should be available for community use. I first met her a month after moving in, clipboard in hand, smile tight as a drum, handing me a binder that included not just the official HOA rules but her own interpretations and best practices, approved doormat slogans, flower varieties, even a section titled Community Resource Sharing Initiative on page 47, outlining her vision of turning spare bedrooms into neighborhood assets. I chalked it up to harmless eccentricity and focused on my work, skipping the HOA meetings and ignoring her not-so-subtle hints. My mistake. The friendly visits started, Glenda showing up with thin excuses, always angling for a peek inside, once even inviting herself in under the pretense of needing the bathroom. I caught her snooping in my guest room. She played it off, but I knew what was up. Then came the escalation, notes about my recycling bins, my hose, the energy efficiency of my porch light. I ignored her, which only made things worse. I caught her in my backyard, snapping photos of my Elias because they were, she claimed, 3 inches over the max allowed height. I told her to leave. She huffed about inspection rights. That night, I installed cameras. If she wanted a paper trail, I'd give her one. What really kicked things into high gear was the night she showed up at my door, suitcases in hand, some poor guy named Leonard in tow, claiming to implement her new guest housing program. She'd even laminated herself a badge, like that made it real. Leonard, her out-of-state cousin, was apparently supposed to stay in my guest room for 2 weeks. As a community leader, I must set an example, she said. I laughed, told her no, and made it clear she needed to leave, immediately. She sputtered, threatened to review my membership status, then stormed off, dragging Leonard behind her like an embarrassed toddler. That should have been the end, right? Instead, I woke up the next day to notices plastered to my front door, $200 fine for house hoarding, $300 for failure to provide communal lodging, another $100 for hostile environment, all citing imaginary bylaws or misusing real ones. I called my friend James, who happens to be a real estate attorney. He laughed so hard he nearly choked, then told me not to pay a dime, to document everything, and to brace myself for more nonsense. And more came. Glinda took to next door, painting me as the villain, claiming I was sabotaging her innovative program. Some neighbors took her side. Every neighborhood has its busybodies, but most were just confused or annoyed. The next morning, there was a for rent sign on my lawn advertising my spare bedroom, with Glinda's number. By then, other neighbors were feeling her wrath too. The Patels got cited for visible toys, the Johnsons for having unauthorized bird species at their feeder. James drafted a cease and desist letter. I thought maybe, just maybe, that would scare her off. Instead, she doubled down. The next day, a couple showed up at my door with an Airbnb booking, reservation, key code, everything. Turns out Glinda had snapped photos of my guest room and listed it herself, using her inspection visit to gather the evidence. I helped the couple get a refund and called James again. Time to involve the police, he said. This is actual fraud. Before I could file charges, Glinda called an emergency HOA meeting to discuss my supposed violations. James came with me. Glinda, in full power suit, delivered a 45-minute presentation, charts, graphs, even floor plans of my house, claiming I was destroying the neighborhood by refusing to share my space. James calmly tore her arguments apart, then announced we'd be pursuing legal action. The room erupted. An elderly board member called for a vote of no confidence. Glinda lost, 28-2, and was removed as president right there, sputtering about conspiracies and promising revenge. The next morning, my driveway was blocked by a moving truck. Glinda, undeterred, had hired movers to unload her things into my guest suite, complete with fake documents, a lease with my forged signature, and an entire fictional paper trail. I called the police. Glinda showed up, suitcase and briefcase in hand, launching into another monologue about community and the greater good, totally ignoring reality. The cops, thankfully, saw through the forgeries instantly. Turns out this wasn't even her first property dispute. She'd tried something similar in another town, just never at this scale. They cuffed her right there for attempted fraud, forgery, and breaking and entering. The look on her face, pure disbelief, still insisting she had authority, even as the squad car pulled away. But the madness didn't end there. The investigation uncovered she'd been running a shadow Airbnb racket, listing not just my house, but others in the neighborhood, collecting deposits, sending strangers to properties she didn't own. She'd forged documents at the county clerk's office, embezzled HOA funds, and terrorized half the block. The HOA board found evidence of years of petty harassment and fraud. She even tried to defend herself in court, waving laminated badges and spouting grand theories about communal living, invoking kibbutzim, Soviet apartments, you name it. The jury didn't buy it. Guilty on all counts: fraud, forgery, trespassing, attempted extortion, misuse of authority, you name it. Sentencing day was something else. The judge handed down 3 years in prison with mental health treatment, $40,000 in restitution, a lifetime ban from all HOA boards nationwide, and, as the kicker, required her to spend probation in actual public housing, forced communal living, the one thing she'd tried so desperately to force on others. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Life returned to normal. Well, almost. The neighborhood held a barbecue in my yard the night Glinda went to prison, everyone sharing stories of her insanity, laughing for the first time in months. The HOA instituted reforms, real checks and balances, term limits, transparency. The spare bedroom she tried so hard to claim stayed just that, a guest room, for actual guests, or empty, simply because I could. Every now and then, someone jokes about starting a guest housing program. The joke falls flat, too soon for most of us. But there's relief, too, a sense that justice, real justice, was finally served. The new HOA board learned their lesson. Even the state took notice, tightening laws on HOA authority. And as for Glinda, last I heard, she was reorganizing the public housing lunchroom, still dreaming of communal utopias, forever banned from wielding power over other people's homes. So what's the takeaway? Bullies never stop if you give them an inch. You stand your ground, or they'll take the whole block. That was my line in the sand. And if you ever get an eviction notice in Comic Sans, don't ignore it. Just know you're about to live through a story nobody will believe unless they lived it with you. Now, let's hear it. What's the craziest thing an HOA, landlord, or neighbor has ever tried to pull on you? Was justice served, or did the bully get away with it? Drop your story in the comments. I can't wait to read them.